Okay, so this is probably one of the most important videos I've ever made. The 7 rules of church communication strategy. And if you've ever had people say the following to you, "Hey, I didn't even know that event was happening.
Did you read the email I sent?
What time is that event again?
I put it in the bulletin.
Well, why didn't you announce it?"
We did, for 6 straight weeks.
This is for you. If you've ever experienced personal tension or conflict between different ministries or leaders in your church as everyone jockeys for stage announcements and social posts and mentions in the newsletter and on and on and on, this is for you. Or if you've ever looked at your social feeds, your website, your emails and felt sick because they're just so promotional. Dates and times and details and just so much information, and no matter how much it gets talked about, people still aren't getting involved. This is for you. Yes, it's gonna be a longer video, but that's because we're gonna solve this once and for all. And by the way, stick around until the end of the video because I've actually got a written church comm policy based on what we're about to learn that you can download and formalize in your church. That's at the end of the video, so stick around for that. Well, hey there, I'm Brady Shearer. This is Pro Church Tools, and we're here to help your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. If we're just meeting for the first time, consider subscribing. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if your church is ready to take its next big leap, that's what we built Nucleus for. The next generation of church software dedicated to seeing more next steps and life change at your church. With Nucleus, your church gets a modern website builder, sermon engine, giving platform, social media library, and unlimited stock footage. Thousands of churches use Nucleus, and you can get started for free with no credit card required. Just head to nucleus.church to start your 30-day free trial. Again, that link is nucleus.church, and you'll also find it in the description below. The 7 rules of church communications that you're about to learn are meant to form the concrete comms policy at your church. You know, so many of us, we get thrust into the world of church comm or church digital without any formal expertise or training, but someone's got to do it, you know, such as church life. And so many of us encounter the same problems. So much so that when I post on social a quote that says, "Use social more like a pulpit, use social less like a bulletin," we all agree, we shout amen, but then we get back to our everyday jobs in church and we don't have the systems to sustain or allow for that ideal. And unfortunately, without a strong vision for what church comm strategy should look like in churches, big or small, if we can't make formal policy ourselves, informal policy gets made for us. And we just end up drifting, getting pulled back and forth by different demands and ideas, which makes us miserable, of course, but it also doesn't translate to effective communication. So not only are we suffering, but our churches are suffering. Because the bottom line is this: no one ever gets to where they want to go because they drifted there. When you're out in the ocean drifting, the ocean will take you wherever it pleases. If you want to reach your desired destination, you need intention. And this has never been more true than right now because the global pandemic has put way more stress on whatever informal comm structures we do have. And as I've been mentoring people through this season, so many are feeling this intense pressure as now all comms is being facilitated online, making it even more clear how much a formal and systemized policy is needed. So with all that being said, let's get right to it, starting with rule number 1. Rule number 1, the barometer we use to measure effectiveness is next steps. Now, last week I published a video called The New Rules for Church Growth in a Post-Pandemic World, and in many ways, this video is part 2 of that, a follow-up. So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of next steps and how to accurately track them, it's crucial that you watch that video. It's linked in the description. Because like I said, no one ever gets to where they want to go by drifting, so it's imperative for us to kick off our church comms policy by getting everyone on the same page as to how we evaluate the effectiveness of our church's efforts. Because in my experience, the seeds of conflict and personal tension are planted here. Different ministries and leaders, they've all got different ideas on how ministry is meant to go, and if you're a church that's still using attendance as your primary tool of measurement, well, it's no wonder that your church's social feeds, emails, and announcements are all promos for in-person events, because if attendance is the main goal, then your communications will be all about getting people to attend things. But attendance is not an accurate barometer for life change. It's not even a predictable indicator in most cases. And you might be wondering, well, why do we need to measure the effectiveness of our churches anyway? To which I would say, because the stakes are too high. We as churches exist to affect life change, which has heaven and earth consequences. Plus, our efforts are only made possible by people freely giving us their money that they worked hard for. So we have a responsibility to make sure we're not wasting our resources. And the first step to ensuring that happens is to define an accurate model of evaluation. And again, I get into all of this in greater depth in the preceding video, so make sure to watch it. And the last thing I'll say about this first rule is that it's paramount that your whole organization is on board with it. Once you establish that the barometer we use in our church to measure effectiveness is next steps, that needs to be unanimously understood, because just as no one ever gets to where they want to go by drifting, you also can't get to where you want to go if everyone in the boat wants to go to different places. Let's move to rule number 2. Every next step in our church happens through the central hub. All right, so we know next steps are what matters most to our church. How do we track them? How do we facilitate them? That's what the central hub is for. The central hub is the single destination for every next step in your church. And the reason this is important is because most churches confuse their congregations with chaotic messaging. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll tell our congregations to check the bulletin and call the church, talk to a pastor, visit the table in the lobby, download the app, check out the website, email a ministry leader, and then we wonder why people are coming up to us asking about event details. And the worst part, well, the end result of this type of messy communication is fewer next steps. Not to mention, we as ministry leaders have to maintain all of these different platforms, many of which cost money, and all of which definitely cost us time. So there are a few principles that the central hub needs to abide by to work. Number 1, the central hub needs to be accessible 24/7. Think about it this way. Your week has 168 hours. If Sunday service is just 1 hour on average, how is your church reaching people in the other 167? And this has never, again, been more important than it is now, as many of our churches are still not meeting in person like we normally would because of a global pandemic. And even when we do return to in-person gatherings, not everyone's going to feel comfortable coming back at the same time, and there's still so much uncertainty ahead of us. And one of the biggest downsides of using bulletins or your church's lobby for next steps is that, sure, it works on Sunday, but what about the other 6 days of the week? What about the other 167 hours? What about a global pandemic? This is why the central hub at your church needs to be available at all times 24/7. We want people to take next steps all week, whenever they're inspired to do so. And when that does happen, here's what it looks like. Adam told us. The central hub gave us the ability to promote things on Facebook with an immediate action step. So all of a sudden, people were signing up for things all week long. We used to only have people indicate interest on Sunday. Now we've got more people signing up on weekdays for things. Principle number 2, the central hub must be accessible from every device. That means phones, tablets, desktops, you name it. And this is why we never recommend using a downloadable mobile app for your church's central hub, because an app is only accessible after downloading it, and you can't access it from laptops or desktop computers. So you're immediately losing half of your access points, which is not good at all, nor prudent. And lastly, principle number 3, the central hub must be able to capture, store, and distribute information. Remember, the purpose of the central hub strategy is next steps. People in your church taking action, joining a small group, signing up to be baptized, giving up tithes and offerings, submitting a prayer request, etc. And every next step requires a certain level of submitted information that then needs to perhaps be routed to a certain ministry leader or database. And the problem with this is that most churches still use what we call a yellow pages website. They display information about a church, but they're not dynamic, nor can they facilitate next steps. What you want instead is a central hub website. And if you're wondering what kind of software you might need for this, that's what we built Nucleus for, the world's first central hub website software. It can replace your existing website, and you can swap out a yellow pages site for a central hub website. But let me say, as much as we've baked all of this policy into our website platform, Nucleus is not the only web builder that can do this, so don't let this be a hang-up for you. If you do want to try out Nucleus, we make it easy. There's a 30-day free trial with no credit card required. Link in the description. And if you want to see what real church central hubs look like and how transformative they truly are, there's another link in the description to a full guide on how to set up your central hub in detail, linked below with success stories from real churches. Let's move to rule number 3. And look, I get it, this is a long video. Establishing a working church comm policy from scratch takes a little while. I promise you, I'm doing my best to cut out the fluff. Rule number 3, every call to action must use the same script. For the central hub to work as it's meant to, it needs to be the only destination that you send your church to. Because if you also tell people to check the bulletin, if you also tell people to check the app, your entire strategy will fall apart before it can even get off the ground. And so for this to be adopted church-wide on a leadership and ministry level, you need to provide people with a script to use over and over again as the single call to action. So here's what that script looks like. Head to lifeabundant.info or visit the lifeabundant.info kiosk in the lobby. And yes, those are real working links of a real church's central hub. A couple of important notes I need to make here. Never say, head to our website. I see churches do this a lot. You know what your website URL is. You have it memorized. A new person will not. And many people in your existing congregation may not. So whenever you refer to your website, call it by its domain name. Example, head to lifeabundant.info. Not head to our website. Secondly, you might be wondering what the lifeabundant.info kiosk is. Well, this is the physical version of your central hub that lives in your church's lobby somewhere. There's a guide in the description below that outlines how to create this with a cheap tablet and stand, and best practices for making it work. Now you might ask, why have this physical kiosk? Couldn't we just have the central hub website exist online and nowhere else? To which I would say, yeah, in a perfect world. But perhaps your church has a significant portion of older folks that aren't tremendously tech savvy. Perhaps not everyone in your church has reliable internet access all the time. And by setting up a physical version of your central hub in your lobby, you can accomplish a couple of important things. One, you can ensure that every next step goes through your central hub, whether online or in person. So you don't have different databases that you need to consolidate manually during the week. Second, you can train people in your congregation on how to use the central hub website for all their signups. So maybe for the first couple of weeks, they're using the kiosk in your church's lobby because they're not super comfortable with the tech. They need someone to walk them through it. But then eventually, they're doing it themselves on their own devices, in their own homes, once they realize how easy it is. I've seen this happen over and over again. People think their congregations are too old, and then they see how adaptable their people actually are. Adam told me this. I was surprised to see the first person actually use our central hub was an older woman in her late 60s. I think people aren't nearly afraid of change as we may sometimes like to think. And again, link in the description on a full walkthrough guide of setting up this physical version of your central hub. It doesn't have to be complicated or expensive at all, but it works wonders on transitioning people to this new way of doing things. Okay, we've made a lot of ground so far because the first 3 rules in our church comms policy are the core of everything we're doing. The first 3 rules establish what matters and why it matters and how we're gonna get people involved. The next 4 rules will be used to guide us on how we actually do all the promotion in our churches: social, announcements, email, who gets what? How do you decide what gets promoted and what doesn't? But none of that is possible without these first 3 steps as a formalized policy. Rule number 4, the 50% rule. If a promotion does not apply to at least 50% of your congregation, it does not warrant a church-wide social post, announcement, or email. And this rule works wonders for cutting down on the number of promos and requests and frees up your church comms for what truly matters. And ignore the 50% rule at your own peril, because consider this. If each week you share multiple stage announcements or multiple social posts, multiple emails that don't apply to the majority of your congregation, you're conditioning your church to ignore your comms simply because most of them don't apply to the bulk of the people listening. So again, this is one of those rules that benefits both the church comm leader and the congregation, and it helps cut down personal tension, because now if a ministry or leader comes to you and says, hey, I need a social post or announcement for X, Y, or Z, now it's no longer up to you and your discretion on if this promo happens. Instead, you just hold up the request to the 50% rule. And now the rule is the bad guy, not you. And this is why formalized policy is so important in getting everyone to agree on it when it's implemented, because without it, personal tension runs rampant as you are the arbitrator of what does and does not go through. You're like an ancient ruler of Israel making decisions from the throne. We will cut this church announcement in 2, and each ministry will get half. You don't want that. Now you might be wondering, well, how do we promote ministries and events that don't pass this 50% rule? And we'll talk about that a bit more in a later rule, but this is where private online entities become important in your overall strategy. Because if, let's say, the student ministry doesn't qualify for the 50% rule, then they should not be getting frequent public promos from your public social pages. But perhaps they could have their own private Facebook group or private Instagram chat group. And then let the promos happen in there. Email segmentation works for this as well. Group text, WhatsApp, Slack, Discord, so many different options to explore and consider. Rule number 5, the 1 in 5 rule. The one in 5 rule. Yeah. No more than 20% of your social posts should be promotional in nature. And for me, social includes emails here as well. I can't tell you how many mentorship calls I've done with churches where a person asks me to review their social page. As I go through it, I count it up, and every time, 50%, 60%, 70% plus of their posts are promoting events, even in a pandemic. And they tell me, well, it's that digital fatigue we're all going through. Our engagement is down. What's happening? So I tell them, yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me people aren't engaging with your content. The majority of it is just promoting stuff, which means they're probably not even seeing the posts when you're not promoting, because long ago, the algorithm determined that your posts and page were not relevant to its followers. Let me show you an example of this. Here's my Instagram page, @BradyShearer. And if you're not following me already, make sure you do. Most of my timely content gets published on Insta first. And I'm just gonna hover over the like counts on a few of these posts. Pretty consistently, you'll see between 750 and 1,000 likes. But then, 250 likes. What happened here? Now, likes are not the only metric you should be tracking, but when we see a huge drop like that, something's up. So what is it? Well, this post is promotional. It's talking about one of our products. And people just don't engage with promotional content to the same degree as organic content. Now, does that mean you should never use social to promote? No. But this is why the 1 in 5 rule is so important, because guess what? If more than half of my posts were like this promotional one, you'd never see the higher like counts on my non-promotional posts. Why? Well, because people would never see them, because the algorithm would have decided a long time ago that people do not like any of my content because it was overloaded with promos, so much so that the good stuff never had a chance. The 1 in 5 rule is a good sweet spot for ensuring you don't get penalized for being overly promotional. Rule number 6, sprint and sprinkle. If you're able to implement the preceding 5 rules in this ChurchCom policy, you are going to be in a great place. But you might still be thinking, this is just not realistic for me. There'd still be too much pressure to promote. Not everything could fit perfectly within this plan. And then, once one exception is made, then it'll just revert back to how it was before. And I hear you loud and clear on that, which is why rule number 6 exists. Rule number 6 is basically the contingency plan. When an outlier exists, when you just need to bend the rules, do it this way. Sprint and sprinkle. 2 different kinds of promos, the sprint promotion and the sprinkle promotion. Let's first talk about the sprint promotion. Sprint promotions can be run a maximum of 4 times per year, all right? 1 each season. And think of these as larger church-wide promo campaigns. These are the kinds of church-wide events where for a short period of time, just 1 to 2 weeks maximum, you forget the 50% rule, you forget the 1 in 5 rule, and you just go all out promoting. And here's what you need to know about a sprint promotion. It will come at a cost. Your social engagement will dip for a bit, your email open rates will dip for a bit, and by the end of the 2 weeks, people are gonna tire a bit of the promo. But as long as you do these infrequently, again, maximum of 1 each season, your engagement rates will always bounce back. That dip won't be permanent. The problem is that for most of our churches, we're doing sprint promos nonstop. So it's no wonder our comms team and congregations are worn out on promos. By definition, you cannot sprint indefinitely. It's impossible. You have to stop and rest, or you'll just be dragging yourself along, which is how I would describe a lot of our church comms. So to implement this technique to success, think for Christmas, Easter, the Harvest Festival, where you see a huge influx of people from the community, these need to be properly timed. Max of 4 times per year with proper gaps between each so we can all recover. And then we've got sprinkle promotion. So maybe you got something that you feel needs to be promoted publicly, but it doesn't deserve a sprint promotion. Definitely not. Very few things do qualify for that, but you also don't want to break the 1 in 5 rule or 50% rule, because again, you make that one exception and then who knows what comes next. Sprinkle promotions are gonna be your best friend. Let me show you an example. Back to my Instagram, again, @BradyShearer. Follow me if you haven't already. Here's a carousel post where I'm teaching a new social media post idea for churches. And the first 5 slides on this carousel post are exactly what you want to see on social. Engaging, valuable, no strings attached. Accomplishing the mission of my organization natively on social. But then, on the 6th slide, there's a promo for Nucleus, our software product. This is a sprinkle promotion. It's not the meat of the post, it's not the substance, It's the sprinkle at the end. And this kind of promo is so powerful for a number of reasons. First, this gives you a promotional outlet for all of those in-between things that don't fit perfectly into our policy. Second, the sprinkle promo allows you to promote something without breaking the 50% rule or the 1 in 5 rule. It's an exception to the rule, a workaround. Because as long as the promo is a sprinkle at the end and not the substance, you're golden, because the post itself is not promotional. It's just a good post with a sprinkle at the end. Sprint and sprinkle promotions, the exceptions to the rules that make this whole comms policy sustainable for the long term. Finally, rule number 7, the church promo formula. In the past, I've taught this as the church announcements formula, but it works for more than just announcements. It's the ultimate framework for all church promotions, and the formula itself is crazy simple. One story plus one next step. For event promotions, that next step is always going to be your next step script from rule number 3, head to lifeabundant.info. And then the story part is just that, telling a story. And I've talked enough to this point in this seat. Let me show you an example of me talking from stage. This is how I'm using that formula in a church announcement for baptisms.
So one of the most important moments in the life of every follower of Christ, and it's something that almost every church celebrates in one way or another. When I was a kid, I went to this really small church out in the country, just about 30 people. We did church pretty differently then. Worship was just one acoustic guitar, and then we would all sing along. We used overhead projectors. Who remembers the overhead projector? Somebody, right? The chorus is coming, so you got to take the sheet off, put the other sheet on. It's a whole big thing. And we did baptism there, and the way that we did it is that one part of the baptism was that if you were being baptized, you had to go up and in front of the church explain why you were doing it, why it was important to you. So I got baptized around the age of 10, and the idea of going in front of the church and proclaiming something like that was a pretty terrifying possibility. And so to prepare myself, I got a sheet of paper and I wrote down what I was going to say, right? I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to read it. And I'm going to memorize it easy. So I get up to this, old rickety pulpit in a really small chapel, and I can barely see over the top. I'm so short. That hasn't changed really, but I can barely see over the top. And I start reading, and I'm like, I've decided to give my life to Jesus. Sounds cute, right? No, it was horrifying, I can assure you, as a kid. And so I vowed then and there. I said, you know what? I'm going to get this moment over with, but I vow to never serve in a church where I have the responsibility of talking live from a stage to a large group of people. I did not succeed. Anyway, that's my baptism experience. We're not going to do things entirely like that here at Central. For this baptism experience, you don't have to come up in front of everyone and share, your reason for doing it, but it doesn't make it any less celebratory. That moment when I was 10, I still remember that distinctly. My family was there. It was this amazing moment.
But this is not just for church announcements. Take a look at this email that one of our mentorship students sent out to her church. Hit pause if you want to read the full thing. Basically, it tells a story about how God is working in this person's life, and then the call to action is asking folks to reply to the email and share their own account of how God is working in their life right now, in the middle of a pandemic. The results? Well, the last time I heard from this student, she had received 21 replies to this email where people in her church were sharing their stories of life change. And now, with permission, those 21 stories are being turned into future social posts for this church, showing that when you treat comms how it's meant to be treated, it creates this snowball effect where engagement begets more engagement, next steps begets more next steps. This video began with a promise that we could eliminate forever the issue of people coming up to us and asking for event details and information, because as much as we communicated it, they still seemed to miss it. Now, if you can relate to this problem, you're not alone, because this is incredibly common in churches, and it's a symptom of a much greater issue, a broken comm strategy. Because here's the truth, you could promote an event for weeks on end across every single promotional channel your church has at its disposal, and people will still miss it. And normally, when something like this happens, our church's gut response is to just promote more. We think to ourselves, if people aren't getting the info they need, it must be because we're not sharing it enough. But this could not be further from the truth. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. Because your responsibility as a communicator and as a church is to ensure that your congregation has all the information available to them. Yes, but it's not your responsibility to communicate all that information on an ongoing basis. Let's use an analogy here. When you go to the movies, prior to the feature presentation, the theater will show trailers for upcoming films. So let's imagine there's a new Bond film coming up. It's getting released in November. How will the studio promote this? Well, they'll cut together 1 to 2 minutes of the most action-packed parts of the film, put it together in a trailer, and use that to inspire you to see the movie. And at the end of the trailer, you might see something that says, coming this fall. Or as the movie gets closer to its release date, the end could say, coming this November. But that's going to be the extent of the information you'll be getting. Now, can you imagine sitting through a trailer, 2 minutes in length, when the theater just overlays upcoming showtimes on top of B-roll from the movie? That would be entirely ineffective. And yet that's how we promote in church. We prioritize information over inspiration, but it needs to be the inverse. Inspiration over information. Consider that bonus rule number 8. And that's how you communicate effectively. Inspiration over information. And that's what the church promo formula I just taught you is based on. Because when you see a trailer that truly inspires you, when you hear a story that inspires, what do? Well, for the movie, you search out showtimes in your area on the theater's website and get that information yourself. And the solution for our churches is the same. And this is where the central hub, again, comes into play, where we flip the script on how we promote in church. We put the responsibility on the congregation and empower them to gather the info they need, rather than endlessly trying to communicate everything to our churches and spoon feed them. Think of it as a self-serve gas station versus a full-serve gas station, because guess what? You will never, I repeat, never be able to construct a comm strategy in which you're able to share all the info you need to every person that needs it in your church. Until you begin to flip the script, change the culture, people will always come up to you and others on leadership asking for missed details. And in this scenario, everyone suffers. You, the communicator, suffer as you try to please everyone, an impossible task. Your congregation suffers because they feel helpless to find the info they need when they need it, so they miss out on events and opportunities. And further down the chain, social suffers, email suffers, announcements suffer. Because with this dysfunctional communication plan, we begin to use these other outlets as a crutch to promote, hoping that people will finally get all the info they need if we just talk enough about our events. It's a hopeless approach to comms. But now, with these 7 rules, you've got everything you need to formalize an effective and sustainable policy. And listen, I get it. It's not easy to make such a huge culture shift. It won't happen overnight. Don't expect it to. This type of change is likely going to take at least a year to get its footing. But here's what you can look forward to after implementing this. More next steps across your church. Less stress as a communicator, because you'll no longer be trying to solve an unsolvable problem, and the ability to focus on inspiration in what you communicate instead of being a servant to information. And you'll now have a comms calendar free of unnecessary promotions, which gives us the space to start using comms for ministry instead of just to promote ministry. In the description below, you'll find a Google Doc with this entire policy written down rule by rule. So make sure to download that and formalize it in your own church. It's freely available to you so you can share it with leadership and get everyone on the same page. Thank you so much for your time. If you made it to the end of this video and you're watching right now, can you leave a comment below that just says, made it? In all caps, because you just witnessed that. I want to thank you personally and wish you all the best as you begin to implement this. Hit the thumbs up if you learned something in this video as well. I'll talk to you real soon. I gotta go get a new water bottle.